Hello and a warm welcome to everybody. We'd like to wish everyone a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening, depending on where you are in the world today. My name is Jamie, and I'm one of the co-founders of Safeopedia. Safeopedia's mission is to support the EHS professionals, operational folks, and any safety-minded individuals through free educational content, tools, and resources. A huge shout out to those dedicated professionals for the great work they do on a daily basis. Today, we're very proud to present Qualifying Contractors, Risks and Best Practices. This Safeopedia webinar has been made possible by CQN Advantage. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to today's presenter, Ronnie Tallman. Ronnie is an experienced client relations and contractor management implementation specialist with a demonstrated history of working in the information technology and construction services industry. She works with owner-operators and contractors in the industrial and commercial sectors to assist with their contractor qualification processes and compliance requirements. As Contractor Management and Compliance Advisor at CQN Advantage, she oversees customer implementations and training and ensures that all customers follow industry standards and best practices. In her quote-unquote spare time, she likes to shuttle her kids from gymnastics to hockey and back again. Join the club, yes, spare time. I now invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation. And with that, Ronnie, please take it away.
Thanks, Jamie. So thanks, Jamie, for having me here today. Big thanks out to Safeopedia and to everyone that's joined in today. Thanks for attending. I hope I can provide some really good practical guidance on qualifying contractors, and I look forward to answering some of your questions at the end of our presentation today. So with that, let's get started. So on today's agenda, we're going to start off with some key elements in terms of long-term success with contractor pre-qualification. We're going to talk a little bit about the reasons behind pre-qualifying, why it is important for a purchasing organization to put in place a pre-qualification process. We'll also cover off in details in terms of the actual associated risks and the best practices. And then we're going to do a quick overview of the importance of sustainability, some common bad practices, and what will keep companies successful going into the future. So where does pre-qualification fit into the bigger picture? Here, you'll see the top 5 contractor management activities, which have typically been defined by numerous associations and thought leaders in the industry. So close to home, for myself, this is common to the Construction Owners Association of Alberta. So that would be COA, and also a global thought leader, and that would be the Campbell Institute. And just a quick note, if anyone is unfamiliar with the Campbell Institute, we definitely recommend taking a visit to their website. They are known for world-class knowledge on keeping people safe, and they emphasize sustainable business practices. So it's definitely a good place to go and check out their information. A while ago, the Institute published a paper, and they did a detailed survey with a review on the topic of best practices and contractor management. This is a list of the 5 key contractor management activities that they suggest, and we also support. So that would be pre-qualification, pre-job task and risk assessment, contractor training and orientation, monitoring of job, and post-job evaluation. Today, we are going to cover pre-qualification, and it is a very broad topic. So we could easily talk for the remainder of this presentation on questionnaire design, on mitigation, also on approval processes. But due to the amount of time we have today, we're not going to go into a vast amount of detail on any one of these elements, and we're going to do more of a broader overview. So I hope that provides some good information for you. So with that, let's define pre-qualification and why it is important to pre-qualify your contractor. Pre-qualification is the preliminary stage in a bidding process where it is determined if a contractor has the requisite resources and experience to complete the job as required. So we just thought we'd provide that as the basis to move forward. Plain and simple, if you hire contractors, there is potential risk, and it really doesn't matter how many contractors you hire. You are susceptible to risk and liability. And we're going to discuss some of those risks in our upcoming section here. So with that as our starting point, why should you pre-qualify your contractors? Well, there's a couple of reasons, obviously. First, there's the legal concept of buyer beware. Whereas with any product or service that you would consider purchasing, it's simply good business to know who you're buying from. So where are you getting your services? Where are you getting your product? You want to know about those providers. Further, OHS laws, for example, require harmonization of safe work practices between employees on a work site, particularly for high-risk activities. So the activity of harmonization of work practices, where it's practical to do so, is in fact a contractor management best practice that is required by OSHA. And why pre-qualify in terms of potential litigation? Well, lack of pre-qualification activity can contribute to charges or protection from charges of litigation and potentially conviction in the event of high loss or high potential workplace incidences. There have been many cases cited where a lack of activity in the pre-qualification area can have fairly significant outcomes. So you really want to make sure that you're establishing expectations, that you're able to prove that there's an adequate level of due diligence, especially in communicating the occupational health and safety compliance needs. Experts, associations, and leading corporations typically have led the way in regards to pre-qualifying contractors. They usually may have gone through various different processes, find out what may work, what may not, and then come up, especially with some of those associations, some really good best practices. And most of these will agree and recommend that most purchasing organizations should pre-qualify their contractors and have a standard in place suitable for their operations and their industry. So that can look very different across those industries. So whether that's industrial, commercial, residential, even institutional and renovation market spaces. So it may look different across all those. Continuous improvement, definitely, of course. If you're screening your contractors, you're fulfilling your due diligence requirements. It's giving you peace of mind that the contractors that you're choosing have the knowledge and understanding of the risks. They can complete the job safely, and they can maintain a safe working environment for you. So these are definite elements that contribute to opportunities for improvements, and it helps build relationships within an organization, your industry, and also within your contractor base. So qualifying contractors is a critical purchaser activity. We're going to outline 5 major risk types here, and we're going to quickly talk about some activities that can be done to stay clear of those consequences. So risk 1, you can see down here a few things associated with these risks as well. This risk is primarily you can lose your business opportunities, there could be financial consequences, and that is with improper incident recording. And a couple of reference points that can probably go without saying is your WCB rates or your EMR rates and your regulatory compliance responses get a high degree of scrutiny at the client end. So it is really important to make sure that you're managing those elements and ensuring accuracy in your responses here, because these are really highly important to your clients. As a risk reduction strategy, what we would suggest, and we base this on a lot of experience, there's oftentimes many questions that are completed without knowing the right metrics. So if there's one thing we can stress here, it would be this, and that is to know your client's incident classification standards. Incident classification systems are not the same as workers' compensation claims acceptability, so you may be putting yourself out of work consideration if you are reporting those incorrectly. It is also critically important that you report your loss management experience, your first aids, your medical treatment, and these sorts of things. So it's really important to be knowledgeable in these areas and be sure that your questionnaire reflects accurate information. Risk 2, this would be more susceptible to financial risk or reputational risk. And that is the liability for unpaid contractor WCB premiums. So just a note here, general contractors are at risk if their subcontractors have not paid their required premiums. Oftentimes, recovery actions by the board can run up into the thousands, sometimes 10,000 amount of dollars. And this is unfortunate because it doesn't take a lot of effort to manage this. Where we see here, it's basic knowledge, and the cost is free to be able to make sure that you're keeping up with this. What we would suggest here, really important, is when you mobilize a contractor, make sure that your contractor is providing you with a workers' compensation clearance. This ensures that your subcontractor has a valid WCB account. That's important. And as you go through the relationship with your contractor, get a WCB clearance at the end of each month. Or if every quarter works for you, that may be better timing. But this will ensure that your subcontractor is maintaining their account and keeping that account in good standing so that you're staying away from that risk here. Risk 3. This would be on the financial side, even loss of business opportunity, and that is due to poor safety performance. So know that if you're poorly managing your work-related claims, if you're incurring serious injuries, this will drive up your workers' compensation insurance rates. That would be where those financial opportunities may be limited because many people will want to be working with safer contractors. So some notes here, it is, medium to high to control. There is some cost to that. So there's a few things you'd want to do just to make sure that you're avoiding this. It's important to put in place an occupational health and safety management system. If you're doing that, you're trying to comply with certain standards. You'll be more aware of what's going on. And like we mentioned there, your WC claims and rehabilitating injured workers will help limit your costs. So something to keep in mind there. If you're not entirely educated on this, you can contact your industry association. You can hire a consultant to help you out, or you can educate someone in-house who'd be able to take on this role and hopefully be able to educate the rest of the organization on these. So we just talked about poor safety performance. Now we'll go into poor regulatory performance. And this has to do with your violations of OSHA and your workers' compensation insurance requirements. It can result in possible legal actions or penalties from your regulators. If you want to avoid these things, a few things you can do here, and some good common practical advice is companies should not ignore the most frequently cited OSHA violations. Some examples of that, if you're not too familiar, would be hazard communications, machine guarding, trenching, lockout, tagouts, slips, trips, and falls, and electrical hazards, just to name a few. And some key things. Every employer should go to the OSHA website and type in their appropriate standard industrial classification code, and then they can discover the top 10 standards for which OSHA is citing in your industry. Once you've done that, you can look back at your system or what you have in regards to your health and safety management system, what you're currently doing, and see if you're in compliance with that. So key here is definitely making sure you can audit your system to make sure it's well implemented and effective. That goes back to making sure that you're in compliance with some of these OSHA sites. You can also enroll in the VPP program. That is U.S. construction-based, or here, since I'm in Canada, we have the Certificate of Recognition program, or CORE program. And depending on where you are, there's multiple different industry-sponsored audit programs. So those are definitely risk reduction strategies to manage that. This is a big one. Many of you may be familiar with this. This can be very costly and can result in legal consequences. and that is the liability from unmanaged subcontractor certificates. So general contractors, you could be liable for the direct costs and the legal liability if incidents occur and there is no coverage in place. If you really want to be mindful of that, there's a few ways you can manage this. Use a database, not a spreadsheet, to manage documents that have expiry dates, because they really are the best tool. It'll ensure that your certificates are being tracked, that expiry dates are being anticipated. Also, if you're using, say, a commercial database software, a third party, it will have automated notifications built into the system. So that will be able to give your contractors ample amount of time to know when their documents are going to expire, or provide a window of expiry for that, and allows them to get their documents either to you, like in your hands, or uploaded into the system. So those are some key things there having to do with some of the more higher level risks that we'll discuss today. So now that we've covered some of the risks of not doing pre-qualification or doing it poorly, let's go over some of the common best practices that at least can help you on a road to success. And we'll take this more at a higher level, some things that we have seen and that have become quite important. If there's only one piece of knowledge gained from today's session, let it be this one: establishing a contractor management standard for your organization that is endorsed by your executive leadership team is a critical success factor in terms of contractor pre-qualification. So typically, this is a written document that covers the management of contractors from first contact to closeout and review of the contracted work scope. So here we are talking mostly about roles and responsibilities, required actions, also any practical tools, and things such as forms, process flowcharts, etc. So whatever it is that your organization typically uses from a documentary point of view to keep yourself organized and accountable to your process, it is highly recommended that this be the starting point for your efforts. Doing the right things in the right amounts at the right time. Very important. There are too many processes or too many systems that tend to impose too much process at the first contact stage. That is where, in our view, many third parties are making this mistake because it's definitely not doing the right things at the right times. You really want to be mindful of the amount of process and at what stage of procurement, and keeping away from implementing process just for process sake. Two-tier pre-qualification, specifically general screening and project-specific screening, is something we would definitely recommend. Two-step process is usually quite a bit more business-friendly in terms of leading the process down to doing what you need to do at certain stages, as well as you learn more about your contractors. So generally speaking, this would be talking about general screening, so getting the basic amount of due diligence. Then after that basic due diligence, you'd move into project-specific screening, which is far more fit for purpose, typically linked also to the request for proposal. So now you're considering the services that the contractor may be providing to you in terms of the actual work scope that is being proposed. So these are definitely best practices that we promote and support. And just a note on that, based on some of our findings and working within our system, so over about the past 15 years of operations, we find that there's about 30 to 35 really high value data points that clients look at, which also within that, there's about 60% of page views that are only in 3 subject matter areas. And we discussed that back in risk level 1. Also important is making sure that your pre-qualification team has the knowledge and experience to administer questions and analyze pre-qual responses. So clients, members of those teams, should be knowledgeable in the areas they're evaluating. So whether that be technology, safety, quality, finance, make sure that they have an expertise in this area and know what they're looking for, or know what they're going to be evaluating. Also said, contractors should have the right people in place who know how to complete the data responses. So that's typically within questionnaire and the certificate uploads to meet their clients' requirements. We also suggest that both clients and contractors appoint a champion, so the single point of contact. And that should be, communicated both internally and externally. So everyone within your organization should know who the central hub person is, as well as to your contractor or your client. This definitely helps open up the channel for communication and streamlining your process. We see this lots even within our own system. Members that need to get in to either complete the data, or members that need to get in to view and evaluate the data don't have access to the pre-qualification system or the registry. They can't log in. Important here, they have to be able to access the data. So whether that's to review it or evaluate it. If everyone can access what they need, it definitely cuts down a lot of time for everyone involved. And it's important to make sure that everyone knows how the process is being used. So if you're using a certain system or if it's an internal process, how is that being worked? And when do you need to jump in to do your part? Those are important things here. It also helps avoid the duplication of gathering data. So again, just wanting to streamline the process for both contractors and clients. Communication is essential in any qualifying process. The contractors need to know what is expected of them, and they need to know what standards they need to be in compliance with their clients. They should be able to get the clarifications and the answers to the questions that they may have during the process, making sure that the clients stay on top of these and are able to answer those questions, and that there's clear documentation of the process, and also the evaluation process should be communicated. We also see it important if contractors are going with you and they do not apply, or sorry, they do not qualify. It's a really good process to explain those deficiencies. It really helps the contractor develop their resources for future projects, and they can kind of work on the areas that they're deficient in and improve upon those. Should go without saying, but contractors should be completing, oh sorry, I'm skipping ahead here. The use of a database. The use of a database is essential, especially if you are going to be doing anything with dated documents, if you're wanting to track dated documents. If you want to make sure that your dated documents remain current and that you're not being exposed to any of the risks, say for example, insurance coverage, then really a database is the best tool for the job. Many of you would probably like to default to Excel as the application to manage contractors, but Excel is not a relational database. It cannot track expiry dates, and it cannot provide you with warning notifications. So there's really not much database functionality there. Some reference points on that, just so you know where there's lots of errors, things we've found. Typically 15% of documents that have been uploaded to us on the first upload do not meet basic criteria. These errors could be in terms of expiry dates, in terms of improper coverage amounts, for example. And along with that percentage, there's many dated documents that are either expired or within their 30 days windows of expiry. So you really want to stay on top of that. And there's just some risk management elements to consider there, that there is exposure and some items to track. For purpose questionnaire design. We are huge supporters, and we highly recommend that your questionnaires be designed in a more practical and business-friendly approach. So you can base that on your contractor category, maybe on the contractor services provided. You can make that for high-risk contractors versus low-risk contractors or services. It is a much better approach to do fit for purpose than doing a one-size-fits-all approach to questionnaire content. Also within here is the issue of redundant content. So obviously if there is built-in redundancy in the questionnaires, That will also build in redundancy in the approval mechanism and some of the downstream activities. So you want to avoid that. So fit for purpose is definitely the way to go here. Moving on to best practices in regards to document management, we definitely suggest the absolute minimum requirements from our point of view, your commercial general liability insurance and verification of that CGL. And where appropriate, automotive insurance is also an absolute starting point or an absolute need to have. And likewise, verification of workers' compensation is a baseline requirement. Financial and organizational capability and resources is very common, very highly valued, typically in the area of people-related matters. So does the contractor have enough people? Do they have the sufficient skill sets to do the work in the area? Also, a demonstrable track record with similar scopes of work is best practice in terms of assessing and approving your contractors. Certainly budget is included in this section. Does the contractor have a track record of coming in on budget and on schedule? Can they execute their work with a high degree of quality? You also want to make sure that they're in compliance with the health, safety, and environmental standards for the worksite or the client. So there's some key elements in that area. Now moving into more, contractor approval, basic due diligence. Of course, primarily reviewing safety records, WCB rating, ensuring adequacy of insurance components. They're going to give you the widest lot of due diligence, although there may be a little bit of work and effort with the administrative investment with that. So verifying insurance, whether that's your commercial general liability or workers' compensation, and taking a look at the contractor's EMR ratings or workers' compensation performance versus their industry as a rating group. And then you want to make sure that you're obtaining the licenses, certifications, that contractor needs to execute for that scope of work. These are all relatively simple things to provide, and they give you a very wide swatch of due diligence. So we highly recommend this in terms of fundamentals that just about really any purchasing organization can implement. It is really quite easy to get this information. There's also an importance of moving from, say, a strictly financial pre-qualification into something more performance-based pre-qual. Financial and bonding, of course, are absolutely critical and typically perceived as baseline elements of pre-qualification. So what we're talking about here is the joining of financial pre-qualification to performance metrics. And in this case, you're looking at project-specific experience of the contractor, looking at their key personnel, and then their performance in the areas of quality, health and safety, environmental aspects. At a growing rate, an assessment of the competency of supervisors is definitely important. Your supervisors are on the job site, and your frontline workers. They're out there in the field. They're doing the work in many cases. You want to make sure that you know if they have the skills to run the job or to manage the other workers on site. So the skill sets are quite important here. Post-qualification is a daily reality for many purchasing organizations, regardless of the size or sophistication of the organization. So if your business requirements dictate that you can mobilize a contractor without having pre-qualification done, then we definitely recommend doing a post-qualification. And that post-qualification should probably be restricted to the fundamental due diligence aspects. So that would be insurance, licenses, permits, that sort of thing. It really doesn't add any value if you've hired your contractor based on availability considerations or pricing considerations, and then you're asking for a significant data request after the fact that you've already mobilized them. So just something to keep in mind there. And just quickly to add, if your contractors are signing off on your business practice or following your business practices, it's a waste of time to ask them to submit their standards for evaluation because they're already abiding by yours. So most of those are kind of basic. So we've gone over the high level there. There are two here that I just wanted to bring into view. These are a little bit more advanced activities, and that would be risk mitigation plans and pre-qualification risk assessment tools. So once you're doing kind of all the other stuff really well, you can move into something like this, and it would help you in the long run. So with the work scope specific risk management and mitigation plan, you find there's many things that can be covered in corporate documents that speak in a general sense about how a given contractor is going to manage the risk, but it's much better when they can provide a project-specific risk management plan where they're considering where they're going to be working, the conditions that they're going to be working in, and how they will apply their processes to those specific conditions. So you want to make sure that those are all in place once they arrive at the workplace. You may also want to make sure that you have a mitigation plan in place, especially if they may not, quite meet their minimum standard or maybe meet the levels of other contractors. So your mitigation tool should be able to evaluate these contractors, identify any gaps, and then put in place some steps of mitigation so that you can achieve the expected performance that you are looking for. In many cases, this can be used. This can also kind of lead into a pre-qualification risk assessment tool. And that's pretty much applying a risk rating, per se, to various services that a client may want to purchase or that a contractor may provide for you. And this definitely helps determine the degree of pre-qualification work that may be needed. So ideally, those lower risk contractors should mean less process, and vice versa for the high risk contractors. Good common practice here is using a weighted element approval process where you're looking at a variety of things. So you could be looking at their related experience, maybe the bench strength of the organization. Really here what you're doing is providing a weighting for each category and then assessing with a more broader approach. So those are some of the advanced processes. We're going to take we're going to have a quick chat on sustainability. So it really doesn't matter about the best practices if it's internal or using a third-party registry. There's some keys here. And what do we mean by sustainability? What we really want to stress here is your guiding principle should be to do what you can manage well long term. And that is a question, is the system you're putting in place able to manage your primary business requirements in a sustainable way? So with that, you want to make sure a few things are in check before taking on any process. And in a moment here, we're also going to talk about taking on a third-party process and what kind of elements of sustainability will impact that. So you want to make sure that there's responsibility, so that there's someone there who's able to oversee and health check your process. Of course, there has to be budget required, and that's not just budget for implementing whatever system you're planning on doing, but that budget has to be in place that'll last you the long run through the project or for as long as you want to be running this process. So that's important. And then the oversight, so making sure that your system is healthy, providing value to you. So you want to make sure that those components are in place moving into any process. As mentioned, I said we'd talk a little bit about third-party registries. Third-party contractor co-pay registries are normal for many large organizations and even small ones, especially in the high-risk sectors, so construction, mining, that sort of thing. Your work isn't really done after the first wave of implementation, so it's oftentimes just the beginning. And many organizations perceive the implementation of these systems will be the most tangible and heaviest lift. But in the long run, it's really not. It's not the big picture, because sustainability is the big issue. So you really need to look at your processes or what you want before you start taking on any third-party registries. I've listed a few things here. some common behaviors. So if these are common in your organization or in your work processes, then you really do want to think about the use of a third party or the third party that you're choosing. And I'll explain that just a bit here. Contractor exemptions. If you have to exempt parts of your contractor base from the registry you're choosing, then there's a problem with the solution you've chosen. This is particularly true for small contractors, DSPs, temporary contractors, moms and pops. Many of these contractors do not have the resources to complete the extraneous requirements. So many times the client or general contractor may exempt these contractors and try to alleviate them from the fees or the administration time if there's an audit or just the process in general. So you really want to look at that and make sure whatever process you're taking on can accommodate all your contractors. This is also common if you are finding yourself frequently having to do workarounds, if you have short turnaround requirements. And again, a lot of this would revert back to the use of temporary or small contractors. We see it all the time. If you're having to do this, then the system or the registry that you have in place isn't going to be able to adapt to this. So you're not doing this at the first go. You may be doing this after. This is also where post-qualification gets into the mix. If you're having a contractor and mobilizing a contractor outside of the registry you've chosen or outside of the process, and then making them come in and do the work, is what you've chosen really the best solution for you? A big one here is a questionnaire mismatch. Many registries have one set of questions, your typical comprehensive questionnaire. It doesn't really take into account your contractor's service or your contractor risk levels. So you really want to make sure that you're taking a look at how the registry collects the data, and does that fit within your contractor base? So just some things to think about there. Here as well, you want to make sure that you have internal resources for the administration, and that goes for both clients. You want to make sure you can sustain the process that you're taking on, that you have the people in place internally to be able to do the work. And then also think about your contractors in this area as well. So do your contractors have internal resources to administrate whatever process you're putting in place? So just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, and also move into more of the important things, especially when we're talking about sustainability. Your business requirements should be the starting point. This should be the base level, and what is sustainable for you if you're taking on a new process. So a couple of things here. Realize that not everything is mission critical. So before taking on, say, a third-party registry, you want to make sure that you determine what is important to your organization regarding your contractor's organization, their capability, commercial aspects, health, safety, quality elements. But not everything could be extremely critical for you. That's why it's really important to establish your minimum requirements in the areas. It is our experience, and we see this all the time. I've talked to many clients, contractors. Many organizations take on a third-party registry with no statement at all of the requirements that they want. And many times, leading into this next point, the registries will dictate what they should and shouldn't be doing. So you really want to make sure that you know your requirements and take a real hard look at how the registry may either be taking over what you are currently doing or adding to the process, giving you a lot of benefits. Because if it's not going to benefit you and help you sustain your process, you really may want to overthink things. And just a note here, registries tend to consider those at the top of the food chain. So that's your major clients typically, especially in terms of product design and business models, which is kind of funny. It's kind of ironic. Contractors pay about 90% of registry revenues and yet have very, very little input when it comes to design and business models. So I'll just leave you with those thoughts. So we've kind of talked about some risks, best practices, and now I want to talk about some of bad practices. We're going to call them anti-best practices for today. The first one, questionnaires that are not fit for purpose for the contractor's risk or service category. And I've mentioned that a few times in different sections of this presentation. You want to avoid using a questionnaire that is not fit for purpose for your contractors or their service categories or the risk levels. You know, a long, detailed questionnaire may be required for complex work scopes, but majority, simplicity rules. Simplicity rules the majority of the time, especially at the pre-qualification stage. So roofing contractors shouldn't be expected to know how to pour concrete and vice versa. And we see this all the time. So you want to stay away from that. A system that requires contractors to create or obtain safety procedures for services they don't provide is really bad business. We've heard of these and we see it. You don't want to force your contractors to make things up. They shouldn't have to meet these random pre-qualification requirements. You know, and everyone typically knows, there are no contractors that provide all services. So you really need to stop treating them like you think they should, especially in certain processes. You want to be able to stick to what you know. You want to be able to stick to what your contractor knows and about the services they provide. Good business, again, simplicity rules the majority of the time. You better ensure that your processes and standards are up to par. If you're going to be starting creating process, just to have process in place, you really want to make sure that you have that. There is no point in stringing that down your contractor chain if it really isn't embedded in the full process, in your process. If your contractors are forced to cut and paste legislation into company manuals, they are not magically in bed with more safety knowledge by using their word processing skills. Safety legislation is owned by the state and for the benefit of the workers and the employers. So you really want to avoid recreating legislation in your own image for no reason at all. Just because you have a certain piece of legislation in your manual does not make you safer. Many times you've paid a company to input that into your manual, or you've had to do this to meet some compliance requirement. It's not making your contractor safer by doing this. Contractors sending the management team pre-qual information and having to post their information to the database. So like I mentioned it before in our sustainability chat, exempting contractors. So if you are if you use an electronic database, whether that's a manual system or maybe you're using a third-party registry, you want to use that to reduce duplication. And it should serve as the sole source of contractor data to the best degree as possible. So if your procurement or safety or your project management people insist that the contractor sends the same information to them individually and has already posted this to your database or your registry, you are doing it wrong. You should be monitoring your people and your database usage and not adding more administrative work to an already top-heavy process. You want to make sure you're using one system and everyone should be in there looking at it and not having things sent outside of that to the best degree anyways as possible. Your approval criteria should be easy to explain and be appropriate for the contractor category you are assessing. Frequently changing criteria means frequently frayed nerves for both the clients and the contractor base. So none of us like going through the approval process. But usually with professional contractors, they'll respond more positively if the requirements are reasonable and transparent. So a couple of things to keep in mind here. We're going to go into our future trends. What we see, what I see, what I hear quite often, actually. First is the simpler, more economic third-party options. So there are good reasons why most general contractors manage their subs with a manual or semi-automated process, because really given a choice between an internal system that works with minimal implementation friction, or say having to choose a contractor copay system or a registry-controlled process with large fees, in most cases, the general contractors just keep on doing the cheapest thing that works best for them. So we're really seeing actually a fracturing in the market. There seems to be a big pulling away from the conventional registries, and there's many more simpler and niche products that are coming into the marketplace. Absolutely an issue currently is the voice of the contractor. Typically, it is the voice of the client that's much more seen. So as I mentioned before, there's about 90% of contractors fund that registry revenue and yet have very little input. So that's kind of discerning. I mean, for any service-based company, if your customers don't have any tangible means or know that their voice is being heard, there's a problem there. So a lot of people are looking, for products or processes that take into account that voice of the contractor. The days of monolithic, one-size-fits-all, needless lengthy questionnaires and processes are gratefully coming to an end. Many users of the third parties are demanding more flexible options. So we see that, we hear that quite often as well. Last one here is, there's certainly a trend towards more data being requested of contractors, but this is actually frequently at odds with usage. So while there's a very large amount of data being requested, we see that the clear majority of page views are typically done in the area, and I've mentioned this before, of your HSC stats, your workers' compensation, your experience modification rates, your EMR. Those are all frequently looked at, as well as your contractor responses to the regulatory compliance questions. So these elements themselves typically account for more page views than all the other page views combined. So just a quick reference point there. To kind of close this off, an intelligently designed pre-qualification system should conserve your time. It should conserve your financial resources as well. With the end result, you want to be able to expand your business opportunities. You want to make sure that you're getting larger contracts and that you're using vetted and reliable contractors. I mean, that's the whole point of this. Going through these processes, you're also going to get a much better visible and communication kind of chain within your contractor base and within your organization, and that will definitely improve your contractor relationships. And we also see moving into the future, purchasers being more in control of their own process and determining their system requirements based on their corporate needs and industry best practices. So that's actually something really good looking forward. The industry best practices can help a lot of companies out here. So with that, that closes our presentation today. And I'd like to thank everyone who has attended and all of those that have stuck through the presentation with us today. And I'll throw it back over to you, Jamie.
Great, thank you, Ronnie. Yeah, it's tons of information. I know it's you keep saying it's high level, but a lot of that is taking a nice deep dive. And again, if we've got about 10 minutes left on the hour, so if you've got your questions, a ton have come in, but you got about 10 minutes to get them in. So yeah, type them right into the console. So yeah, with that, let's get right to the first question. Mohammed has a question. And Mohammed asks, what is the best case scenario for contractor selection and evaluation?
At the end of the day, what you're wanting to do with vetting or having having reliable contractors is that you're putting contractors out on your work site and wherever you may be putting them, that they're qualified to do the work for you, that you know this for sure. You put them through some sort of process. It's hard for me to completely answer that without knowing exactly how you're vetting them or what process they're going through. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you're covering your liability, that your risks are minimized, and that you have good, solid contractors working out on your job sites. I mean, that's the end result for any of the processes I've gone over today. If you had something a little bit more detailed, I could probably answer that better.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, if you could answer the best scenario, that might be the
scenario. You have the perfect contractor, right?
Yeah, well, there you go. I'd also like to add, just having some experience in the construction sector, having a way, that initial kickoff with your contractors or subcontractors and clients, really to set the stage, make sure that everything's in place, and also having a means for feedback and monitor a way to monitor the feedback and performance. So yeah, no silver bullets here. Let's see here. All right, Ellie has a great question here. Can you please explain the post-qualification process? I would love to know how it can be implemented and when exactly would you say it may not be needed? Great question.
Great question. Post-qualification. As I mentioned, there's many reasons why companies could be doing post-qualification. A lot of times this has to do with getting or mobilizing a contractor out onto site quickly. You may be doing price. They may be the only contractors in that area, so you just kind of have to go with who's available to you. In that case, in many of those cases, what ends up happening is you're not putting the contractor through the pre-qualification stage. So there's not time to get their certificates and have their responses to all the data that you may require previous if you are actually going to go through and vet those contractors. Post-qualification is actually really important. It's important for those that are doing pre-qualification and those that aren't doing pre-qualification. Post-evaluation is also valuable if you've already hired and mobilized a contractor, put those guys on site. Included in that post-evaluation, you can also do a performance review as well. So you know if that contractor what was good on your site, you know their strengths, if there was any deficiencies that you need to manage, possibly this would go kind of to mitigation tool even. You can mitigate with your contractor, making sure they're meeting your compliance standards going forward. So you have that, success factor with also doing the post-evaluation. There's other reasons why you do post-evaluation as well. Many companies, especially if you don't have a pre-qualification process in place, a lot of clients or general contractors, in many cases, don't have a clue of what contractors are on their sites. They may not have a clue of what subcontractors of their contractors are on their sites. So at that point too, then you're looking at a post-evaluation or a post kind of performance review as well.
Great, thanks, Ronnie. Let's see here. Lindy asks, this is an interesting question. Yes, how key is a risk assessment?
You're going to want to make sure that you're doing kind of any pre-job tasks. Those would be including your risk assessment. Many companies handle these differently. So some of these with higher risk ratings may have higher elements within their risk assessments. They could be using risk matrices. In that case, that would bring in lots of different, components, So costs, schedules, securities, definitely other factors in there. You could be doing another process. You want to maybe look at hazard assessments within there, making sure that you're conducting your meetings with your contractors, making sure that anything in your scope of work, that risks are also assessed and pointed out there so that everyone is on the same page. So they'd know, say, the client, what risks are going to be there within the scope of work, and the contractor can provide their risk assessment, so how they would deal with anything going into those conditions and how they would deal with those risks, I guess, with their own processes.
Yeah, this is a really good one from Catherine. She says, are verbal recommendations and experience enough to qualify subcontractors?
In my position, when I look into it, and if I was to recommend it, I would say no. Not to say that it isn't common. It happens all the time. And this would also, many people just take the word of someone, take a recommendation, they're verbal. Problem is you are getting into some of those risks that we discussed in the beginning of the presentation. So if you're just doing a verbal qualification of your contractor, you have no idea if their certifications are valid, if they have the certifications that you require. You don't know anything about their work processes, anything about what they've done in similar situations. Have they done any of this work before? How successful were they in this line of work? A verbal confirmation may work for really small jobs, but I'd say overall, I definitely get something, put a process in place and make sure that you're collecting, your minimum due diligence requirements. So that's your insurance, your WCB, because if you don't, you're going to be liable for this. And there's lots of consequences that can come from that.
Valerie has a great question here. It says, how do you adapt the contractor safety management system to the size of A, the employer hiring, and B, the contractors hired? So it's a question on, in terms of resources, human, financial, and time, how much is required to have a functional and sustainable system? So Ronnie, I don't know if you can talk maybe about some different size of companies and what might be required from a time and effort perspective.
So when I think in the question you had mentioned something about basing it on the size of the organization, and then also how do you adapt that to the size of the contractors? I think that's what you had said, Jamie.
Yeah, that's right.
Your process has to be sustainable to you. And this is really key. If you're going to take something on, and if you're going to implement, say, a third-party registry or any kind of process, you have to make sure that that works for your business, the internal people that you have, the time that those people have to put into managing that system, and also the cost, because there is a cost associated with time, not only cost of purchasing, say, your system and your process or whatever you may be creating, but there's your people time too. So how many hours of work and the cost of that to be able to manage that system. So what I would suggest really is a fit for purpose approach. If you're a smaller organization looking to manage your subcontractors, put in place something that you're able to manage. Don't take on the largest of the large. Because realistically, will you be able to support that? It's not going to work probably for your business or for your contractor base. So that's something to look at there. When it comes to your contractors, fit for purpose is, of course, it's key. If you have low-risk contractors or low-risk contractors or certain contractors, they're trying to qualify. They're all different, so they're not all going to be at the same risk level. They don't all provide the same services to you. You can tailor that process. So what you're doing for, say, a low-risk contractor, you shouldn't be doing the same process for your high-risk contractors. And we see this all the time. I deal specifically with this with one of our products. You can't expect the same from say your small mom and pop than you can from your high-risk, super large corporation. You're just not going to get that. So what you really want to do is tailor the process. Your contractors will appreciate it a lot more. Those small contractors, you should take into mind making sure that you get your basic due diligence, making sure that you're getting the basic and the data that you need from them. And then you can tailor your process to adapt to those that are at a higher risk level, and also for those that provide different services. So I think in answering that, Jamie, I'd say being able to be fit for purpose, tailoring your process to your contractors is key. And don't impose a process that neither yourself or your contractors are going to benefit from. It won't last in the long run.
No, that's great advice. Thank you, Ronnie. I see we're over time, so I am going to sneak in one last question, if that's all right. I very much appreciate everyone hanging on the line. So that's a testament to you, Ronnie. Great information, great presentation. So the last question of the day: who's the lucky one here? Hildy. All right, Hildy, you're the winner. Let's see. Do you have any experience? Do you have any experience in either bonusing a contractor or penalizing a contractor when they do or do not comply with safety requirements? And how do you go about that? If you have experience in that, Ronnie?
Are we talking more about like behavior-based safety? Is that where we're trying to go with that? Or, rewarding contractors, if they have the greatest safety records, then there's a big bonus. If they have bad, then there's consequences.
I'm not sure. I wonder if it's a question of performance metrics. I can see if they don't look. I'd have to defer. I don't know the context, and I don't know if Hildy is on the line. Hildy, are you able to just clarify if you're speaking about performance, or like if someone has a good safety record, have you bonused them out or have seen that situation? I'm familiar with contracts that do it on performance metrics.
Yeah. My specialty is definitely not behavior-based safety and all the components that are entailed there. I do know, obviously some of that. If it was getting more into that, I could definitely respond via email with an answer to that. But it's hard to dictate what a company does in regards to bonusing or not bonusing that company based on their performance metrics.
I wonder if and Hildy, I see you are still on the line. Ronnie, maybe we could talk to Pat and see, because I know he's got like 30 plus years in the industry. He's seen everything.
Yeah, he would definitely be able to answer that question better than I could. He has a lot of experience in that area. He has been through it throughout his years in the industry, and also being in charge of a lot of these things, so he would have a better reference point than I would, unfortunately, with that question. So we can definitely get back to you, Hildy.
That is fair enough. All right, let's we'll close it up there. Ronnie, any final remarks?
No, thanks again for the opportunity today. I hope everyone got some good practical knowledge. Thanks for everyone who stuck through to the end. It did get a little bit long. And Safeopedia, we always enjoy working with you guys. So thanks. I hope everyone has a really great and safe week. Sorry, if anyone does have a question and we weren't able to cover that, my contact information is here. So we can either send you an email, respond via email, or if you want to give me a call, we can also jump into some of those questions if you want to talk further about them.
Thank you, Ronnie. I would also like to thank Ronnie. Great job on the presentation. Nice deep dive. I know that you really could talk about any of these points at length, So really appreciate you did take the time, as far as I'm concerned, covering yourself and doing the right things when hiring contractors. 45 minutes to talk about everything is definitely not enough time. So thank you, Ronnie,
how do you cut it
doing
down?
this.
Thanks.
Yeah. And CQN Advantage, thank you guys. Without you, this definitely wouldn't have happened. And most important is the audience. Definitely without you, none of this would be happening. So we really appreciate you taking the time. We know you have a choice of where to put your valuable time, and we're extremely grateful that you spent some of it with us. So we will close the webinar. We want to thank everyone for attending. We will be sending out a link to the recording and the presentation slides in just a couple of days. So with that, thanks again, everybody. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.